Back tonight, you're in focus, and thanks for staying on. KwaZulu-Natal residents have been left rattled following 2 reported tremors in the province. The first is said to have taken place yesterday, while another occurred this morning. For more on this, we're joined now by Willem Meintjes, who is with the council for geoscience. Good to have you, Willem, and thank you very much for your time. First and foremost, let's talk about tremors and what they actually mean and what they indicate, and the different types of tremors and their scale and how risky each one is.
Good evening, Thabo, and good evening to all your viewers. Yeah, so typically in the South African context, we have generally 2 types of tremors. So some of them are generally what we call as sort of induced type of tremors, and then another type is generally what we refer to as the tectonic earthquakes, which are generally what we've seen in the KZN province now over the last 2 days. So these are typically naturally induced earthquake occurrences along geologic structures that occurs in that area.
So this particular one that occurred this morning is described as a 4.6 magnitude earth tremor. What does that mean?
Thank you. Yes. So as the Council for Geoscience, maybe let me start here. So we've got a network of seismograph stations that are deployed throughout the country that are on a 24/7 basis recording these earthquake occurrences as and when they do occur across the country. So we can confirm that the one from this morning happened around 9:30, just north of Kokstad, about 40 or so kilometers, and that was what we refer to as a magnitude 4 type earthquake. So generally what that means, it indicates the amount of seismic energy that was released from this earthquake. So generally when we speak about a magnitude 4, we regard it as going towards the biggest scale of seismic events, although it's definitely not the biggest ones that we've seen in the country in our recent history.
So 2 of them in a period of 24 hours or so, maybe less. What is the impact of that, and what's the significance of that in the affected areas?
Yeah, so I think South Africa being generally by global comparison being regarded as a generally seismically inactive country, it is quite unique to see 2 relatively larger earthquake occurrences in the same region within a very short space of time from one another. But at this moment, what we can confirm, and based on the understanding that we have of the geology in that area, these are natural seismic events or tectonic earthquakes, as we refer to them, and it's all related to what we call stress redistribution along the East Africa Rift Valley and the Agulhas fracture coming down on the east coast of South Africa. So as these pressures and tensions sort of in the earth crust redistribute, when there's zones of weakness in the geological areas, we typically see these seismic events being formed as a response to that release in pressures.
Yeah. So, Willem, you'd understand, I mean, having just gone through floods, that particular province, and now they're seeing these tremors. Of course, there is a lot of anxiety, apprehension, and uncertainty as to what could that possibly mean. So, having established then the extent of the tremors and the potential impact, as geoscience, what is your feeling in as far as what the response should be? Maybe disaster management teams, should they be on standby, or this is not a time to panic?
Yes, so as the Council for Geoscience, we undertake a couple of research projects, mainly in the space of what we call geohazards. So typically what you saw with regards to the KZN floods and landslide events, as well as the seismic occurrences. And we do work together, being a science council, and on the basis of the research that we undertake to advise government and other organs of state, we do work together with, for instance, your disaster management centers, the National Departments of Human Settlements, as well as COCTA and the like. So at this point in time, we cannot completely preclude the possibility of potential aftershocks from the specific earthquakes that happened now over the last 2 days. So the public must remain vigilant, and if there are any further occurrences that they feel in terms of the areas where they reside, they are encouraged to contact the local authorities. But we are also, as I've mentioned earlier, as the Council for Geoscience, monitoring these earthquake activities. And then as part of our work, we do partner with other organs of state, such as the National Disaster Management Center and the like.
Yeah. Maybe explain the concept of the aftershock and what you actually mean by that, because so far the province reports no injuries, no fatalities have been reported at this particular point. What could the impact of the aftershocks be?
Okay, thank you, Tabia. So aftershocks are generally, if you look at earthquakes, they are inherently complex natural phenomenon. So typically when you have a movement along these geologic structures, you can almost imagine it as two planes slipping relative one to another. So sometimes, the slippage is once off and then, you have an earthquake and that's over. But sometimes there might be subsequent slippage and movement after the main shock. So what we've seen in South Africa generally, for the most part, there's generally not a lot of aftershocks. They can, however, be equally as big as what we call the main shock. So I think each and every earthquake occurrence, as and when they happen, it's difficult to predict actually, if there are going to be aftershocks or not. So hence, I think at this point in time, we do urge the public to remain vigilant and report any further activities or experiences on the ground as and when they do feel them.
We've been seeing an increase in weather-related natural disasters. We've also been getting a number of these traumas happening elsewhere in South Africa as well, not just in KwaZulu-Natal. Is this in any way either related to the overproduction that is happening underground or climate changes that are happening?
So I think when it comes to earthquake occurrences, for the main part, as I've mentioned, especially in the KwaZulu-Natal province, it's a natural phenomenon. So from a geoscientific perspective, we understand the Earth over what we understand to be with the geologic record that we have and that we study, being billions of years old. We do have these cycles of change that the Earth does go through. And at this point in time, there's, as part of this continued, you might call it evolution and changes of the Earth, we do see, these natural phenomena occurring. I think in some instances, like what we saw in terms of landslides, for instance, recently in KZN, that might to some extent be related to climate change activity on a global scale. However, that was not yet confirmed, in terms of scientific research that we've undertaken. But we do see more frequent, for instance, intense weather patterns. But in the case of earthquake occurrences, it seemed to be part of that natural evolution process of the Earth.
Yeah. The Premier seemingly pinning a lot of hope on the monitoring infrastructure that we have via the Council of Geoscience. How robust is that monitoring system? How closely to a disaster would you be able to alert a province?
Yeah, so our seismograph network is deployed throughout the country. We've got around about 100 or so seismic stations that are monitoring earthquake activity on a 24/7 basis. Some of them are more focused around the deep gold mining areas of the country, but we have the whole country covered in terms of seismic activity. So we do monitor the occurrences of earthquakes on a real-time basis. And at the current point in time, we are recording roughly about anything between 10 and 30 earthquake occurrences per day, which might seem a lot, but a lot of these events are what we call micro tremors. So it will not be perceived or felt by people. And then occasionally you do have these bigger ones that are typically felt across the region. So we do have that infrastructure in place to monitor earthquake occurrences on a real-time basis at the moment.
Yeah. So, I mean, does that mean we won't be taken by surprise? It won't be something that would catch us off guard?
So I think maybe it's important to mention that when it comes to what we refer to as sort of predictive capability when it comes to earthquakes, even to global standards, it's still something that's very elusive in the field of science. So even countries that deal with a lot of earthquake occurrences, such as Japan and Italy, and even the US, we haven't, as a global community of scientists, yet come to that point where we can accurately predict the occurrences of future earthquakes. But at this point in time, we can monitor them as and when they happen. And then obviously we need to have the right procedures in place to be adequately responsive to damaging earthquakes, which are typically your larger ones on the magnitude scale.
Willem Meintjes, I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on tonight and sharing that information with us. Willem Meintjes, Manager, Infrastructure and Land Use at the Council for Geosciences.